Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Seeing otherworldly places, early teens, be bombarded at random with intricate and vivid images of places I've never been to, in both dreams and the waking world. Places were clearly not of this world, not futuristic or extraterrestrial by any means, but just clearly not on Earth or our current time. Feel extremely homesick when I think of them. Feel an intense longing to visit physically, followed by temporary depression. Each place's discovery is instant and detailed down to the miscellaneous objects in the shelves and the paintings on the walls. As I grow older and reach my current age, I see less and less of them. Still sometimes fondly remember them, and occasionally but rarely discover a new area. So /x/, is there anything to this, or am I just overthinking something unimportant?
Just some glimpses of your past lives or alternative realities. You're here for a reason, and you have to live your current life. I have dreams and waking visions of other worlds, and I took it upon myself to copy the visions of architecture and landscapes into notebooks, just so I can remember them. Just 2 nights ago, I visited this immense structure carved high into red rock mountains within my dream. I had scaled the mountain only to find a dead structure full of these carapaced monstrosities that would pursue me. I woke up and drew the dead structure from memory. I had explored it thoroughly and found quite a significant connection to it upon waking. I had also dreamed up an entire modernistic city for myself to explore the same night. I also dream up many mansions and homes within my dreams. I say you should attempt to bring what you dream into the world.
Your imagination is dying. It is becoming more and more restricted because of the experiences that shape your beliefs. You are also stagnating. These things no longer happen because you don't need them to. You have few new experiences. Your mind is complacent in its existence. Stimulate your mind in new ways, and it'll adapt and seek new or interesting experiences. Realize that rules don't exist. The only limits are the ones that are self-imposed. If you want to experience these places, you need to let yourself. It'll be fuzzy at first, but they'll come. It's like exercising a muscle you have not used for a long time. I found painting helps. Nothing in particular, just things, colors, shapes. It gets the mind working in new ways.
OP here. Sounds familiar to my situation. Random homes and mansions, places in nature, hamlets, cities, etc. Indeed, life has gotten quite monotonous, and I've entered a very strong depression recently that keeps me from exploring my personal interest and enjoying life overall. I made this thread because I was bored and was going over some old documents I had on my computer. Among them was a collection of places I had written down. Felt like I wanted to hear other open-minded opinions, so I came here.
The fact that you're asking questions is a good sign. A curious and creative mind is the best tool to escape any situation, including a depressive slump. Here's some stuff that helps me break my depressive cycles. Physical exercise, a long walk, a gentle jog, or lifting some weights will usually release some endorphins and mess with the shitty body chemistry that's messing your shit up. Vitamin D, do some research of your own, but I find this fundamental to mood regulation, and you'd be surprised how little we get in a modern society. Take a supplement, see if it helps. I know it did wonders for me. Forming new routines and breaking old ones. If you lay in bed all day, stop. Will your body get up? If you're neglecting your hygiene, shower. I'm not sure how bad your situation is, but at my worst, I was completely neglecting myself, which only compounded the situation. If you treat yourself like shit, then you'll feel like shit. Stop somewhere new on the way to or from work. Wander the streets at night, if your area is safe. Stop and look at flowers, read a book, soak in the bath for an hour, and listen to an album from start to finish. I hope you can shake your funk. Just remember, it gets better, but you have to want it to.
I'd read what you write about the places you've been.
I've documented about 5 areas. The rest are all sealed up in my head from memory. I was never quite good at putting such indescribable places into words. Their grandeur is best witnessed through sight, as opposed through words. Yeah, I've been in this fight for a while. There's been an intervention done by my friends and family, and I'm receiving the support I need to push on. I know very well that improvement depends solely on my will to do so. It's just hard to motivate myself after putting myself down for so long. Rest assured, I haven't surrendered just yet.
This thread sounds like the start of a H.P. Lovecraft story. Anyway, as Anon has explained, their past lives. I have strong connections to the language of my ancestors, and when their instruments are played, I can feel their connection, etc. Reincarnation is real. Perhaps your past life was on a different planet or universe or plane of existence. I suggest lucid dreaming, so you can look into it more.
Love me some Lovecraft. I've also attempted that. I figured that if I could control myself in a dream, I could vividly explore these areas. However, in the attempts I've tried, I either turned up unsuccessful, or I never managed to push myself over that tiny edge I needed to make it into a lucid state. I've had many strange encounters in dreams as well. I might make a thread about it someday.
Your post sounds exactly like something in a Lovecraft novel, visiting other worlds beyond human imagination, etc. Advice: if you smoke weed and then stop immediately, your dreams become incredibly vivid and strong. There are also herbs and teas to help you dream, mugwort, African dream root, etc. As others have said, psychedelics can be tried, as well as other drugs. I also suggest multiple days of solitude and meditation. Get a cabin or go camping in the wilderness for 2 weeks. When you're there, meditate, do drugs, try lucid dreaming, etc. Try not to use too much modern technology. When you're there, your mind wakes up and you become connected to the universe in a different way. I'm interested, OP.
Some of the places I've been to are unique and different from the others. Other times, some of the places I've been to fall under some category or are just smaller sectors of a bigger place. For example, I know of this one humongous castle in the middle of a sea of woods. Nothing but trees surrounding the place. I've seen many rooms, places, and nearby towns in the trees near the castle. The place seems so big it's almost endless. One thing that catches my attention is the castle's grand library. Within the library's first floor, there are aisles where their walls are lined with stores like the ones in the picture. Each store, they don't seem to sell, but rather just display, is different. But I know some of them are dedicated to studying herbs, while another seems to have very macabre sketches and displays of animal anatomy and bones. Each sketch is also accompanied by strange runes-looking drawings. It's all very bizarre and detailed, and this is just one of the many.
I also had one of these experiences, and this seems like the best place to share. The dream I had felt oddly real. I was just wandering around and looking at things. It was honestly the most beautiful landscape I had ever seen. The place itself was kinda hard to describe. Maybe I'll draw it or something for better visualization. It was nighttime on a large field, on which strange plants grew in neat rows on plots of earth. The strange thing is that no objects had color. Even though it wasn't particularly dark, everything was monochrome and gray. The amazing thing was the night sky, where huge stars and nebulas all shone in brilliant, almost blindingly bright turquoise and purple. The scope and colors alone made shivers run down my spine. Scattered about on the fields were large blue glowing crystals, which appeared to have fallen from the sky. In the middle of this vast expanse of field was a hill on which a huge dark mansion stood. It was dark, with no lights inside, also monochrome. The only colors that seemed to exist in this world came from the stars and the crystals. I remember walking up to it on a gravel path, and the crystals making the plants cast long shadows which moved and swayed. The walk up to the mansion was pretty eerie. For some reason, I walked around it, and not inside, onto a sort of terrace area. There stood standing stones, with purple glowing runes carved into them. They filled me with a peaceful feeling, and even though the mansion looked foreboding in the darkness, I felt no fear. I remember the door creaking open slowly, with blackness inside. The next memory is waking up, After I woke up, all the purples and blues seemed super bright and high contrast, which normalized after a few hours.
I've been dealing with this my whole life. I've been planning to write about it on /x/ for some time too. I've always had dreams about the most mundane things, going to a store, pumping gas, talking to a street vendor, or catching a train. It was around my late teens that I have realized that those were connected by an underlying theme, that is, being located in the same consistent universe. Those dreams were separate from the surreal ones about monsters or some such, which were pretty much based in random generated locations created from recent memories. No, these were all taking place in the same world, and they showed some sort of continuity, in the sense that the me in them would go to a school, find a job, travel someplace and spend some time there, etc., of which I would get minor glimpses in my waking life. Even later I have noticed that those dreams were taking part in the same time of the day in which they were dreamt. If it was during the night, it was dark and the streets were empty. If it was during an afternoon nap, the theme was pretty much just picking up something after work. In the waking world, I found myself longing for that world and found the visions of it captivating. I still get glimpses of it occasionally, and I still sometimes feel homesick for it. It's a gritty, dirty world. Think of New York in the 70s. The locations I see are similar to ones I see in my normal life, but they look somewhat different for this reason. The technology is different or older. I see steam engines regularly. Mind you, where I am, they were still common in the early 90s. Cars are a mixture of older ones and new ones, somewhat like Cuba, no ever-present screens. Yet I'm sure this is not the past, as dates were sometimes mentioned. I've arrived at the conclusion that this is an alternate reality, where at least the last World War was less intense. So the development of diesel engines and computers did not follow.
One of the places I remembered once, and still can recall, is a dead world of red sands. White spires with their inhabitants who lived in permanent sleep. Ochre sky covered with glyphs of false creation, and the severed head of a mad demiurge that attempted to invade it. It's been long since this world died, and was cast into the abyss, yet I'm able to revisit it. It's like everything was paused, but went into a loop. All died, but the wind keeps blowing without stopping, and the severed head moans some babble that long since lost its sense.
I've had similar feelings brought on by locations in dreams, but the only time I feel any kind of sadness or depression is when I remember them and think back to better times in my life. One in particular I remembered from about 10 years ago, just from reading OP's first post. It was apparently a motel, and it was a giant sandstone building carved into a cliff probably 300 meters above the ocean. It was raining when I first looked down on the building, and the cliff was getting hit by massive waves, probably 60 meters or so as they were breaking. Kinda looked like Navarre in Portugal, but much more fantastic. The building had open balconies out to the edge of the cliff on all floors, thick green vines in certain areas, and fountains that flowed put of walls and into wells that funneled down through the floor. I remember the sound of the waves and rain, and I remember being with familiar people, but I don't remember who. I just get an intense feeling of longing when I think of it now.
Funny you should mention Lovecraft, since this Anon story is basically the same as the dream quest of unknown Kadath. A lot of people don't get why the dream cycle is terrifying. The Anons in this thread who have seen beautiful and impossible places, walked their streets, and know that they can never return realize how horrifying the concepts in the dream cycle are. Seeing tentacle monsters and terrible dreams isn't the scary part. The scary part is knowing that the moment was ephemeral, and that you will never again know that feeling, whether it was joy or fear. That numbness and separation from the fantastic is the most terrifying notion of all.
I couldn't agree more. The sadness I felt when I realized I'd never physically visit these places in my lifetime almost breaks the heart. I actually haven't read The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. I have, however, read The Silver Key. This quote from it is relatable. So Carter had tried to do as others did, and pretended that the common events and emotions of earthy minds were more important than the fantasies of rare and delicate souls. He did not dissent when they told him that the animal pain of a stuck pig or dyspeptic plowman in real life is a greater thing than the peerless beauty of Nareth, with its 100 carven gates and domes of chalcedony, which he dimly remembered from his dreams, and under their guidance he cultivated a painstaking sense of pity and tragedy. Once in a while, though, he could not help seeing how shallow, fickle, and meaningless all human aspirations are, and how emptily our real impulses contrast with those pompous ideals we profess to hold. Then he would have recourse to the polite laughter they had taught him to use against the extravagance and artificiality of dreams. For he saw that the daily life of our world is every inch as extravagant and artificial, and far less worthy of respect because of its poverty and beauty, and its silly reluctance to admit its own lack of reason and purpose. In this way he became a kind of humorist, for he did not see that even humor is empty in a mindless universe devoid of any true standard of consistency or inconsistency. I'd also like to mention that all of these places carry with them the feeling that they've been abandoned. I've never encountered a living creature, although the castle grounds and the areas surrounding its woods do suggest that people have lived there once. The only one time I ever found any evidence of what they dressed like was when I was in the office of a mayor in a town nearby. They dressed rather oddly, at least, the two men in the portrait did. One was tall and lanky, wearing what looked oddly similar to the Xanthouse crown from Dark Souls. Resting on his back was an odd wheel full of dangling ornaments, and his clothing was almost ceremonial and flashy. The short and chubby man at his side is what I assumed to be his assistant. He wore a top hat, one of those odd white round-looking fabrics from the old times that people wore on their necks, and some formal attire consisting of unusual colors.
I had a bizarre Matrix-like dream where I was this kid around a group of kids I've never seen. I don't recall what I was doing, but we gathered together somewhere, and this random kid comes up to us and asked if we could see a menu in our vision. None of the kids around me could see a menu, but stranger kids showed me how to access it somehow, and then everything starts to glitch, and I wake in this dark, brown mechanical room with old rusty pods around me. Tubes everywhere with a faint orange glow light around the pod beds. Moments later, the pods open up and the same kids I saw in the dream were there, and we all instantly recognized each other. Then I noticed a door above a short amount of stairs, and we all walked through it, walking up to what looked like another rusty door with a large doorknob, as if it were a boat. Then two of us tried pulling it open and pushed against a shelf of some kind. We were then inside a really dusty abandoned apartment with a beefy metal front door that had a slide peephole big enough for all of us to look through, and we looked through it and could see there were other apartment complexes that had metal doors on it, but also a train station where I could see some kids running with school bags. And then there was a robot patrolling around and noticed the peephole was opened up and then shut it. We got startled and backed up and waited a bit. Then we opened the door and we all ran out and ran around the place, and there was this old but high-tech looking, very massive castle. An alarm went off and we all ran back to our apartment, shut the door and ran back inside the hidden room with the beds and returned into the virtual world. And then we talked about what we saw briefly, but was interrupted by some man who said we were bad kids, and he was in the middle of explaining why we were there. But I woke up.
This was more of a nightmare. The dream was first person through the eyes of a young boy living in a cabin in the woods with his family. It must have been in Europe because everyone spoke in a foreign language, sounded like German. I only speak English, but somehow I understood what people were saying. I was having thoughts in English, though. It was like watching a memory through someone else's eyes. In the afternoon, the boy and his sister ran outside to play in the woods. The mom told them to stay safe and don't go too far, but she didn't watch them too close. They, boy and girl, ran through the woods laughing and playing for a few hours until they came upon an old cave near what looked like some ruined archway. The girl said something like, "Remember, Mom told us not to go near there," but the boy bravely stated today was the day he would check it out. So the boy started towards the mouth of the cave with the girl reluctantly following behind. The two kids explored the cave for about 2 or 3 hours. It was a fairly small cave. The kids walked through a passage that would have been cramped for a grown-up. The girl shrieked at the sight of a snake and the boy laughed. They reached a larger chamber that was pretty much empty, save for some bugs that creeped the girl out more, which amused the boy. After the boy spent a while looking under rocks and chasing the girl with a bug he picked up, the two left the cave. When they got out of the cave, it was sundown. The girl was upset and stomped off towards the house saying something like, "You're such a jerk. I'm telling Mom all about this." The boy muttered something as he watched her walk off, and he turned to look at the ruined archway. The archway was making a faint humming noise and glowing softly as the setting sun shined right through it. The boy was curious and started walking towards the arch. I was feeling an overwhelming sense of dread as he stood before the archway. The boy stepped through the archway. Nothing appears different on the other side, other than an eerie, impossible silence. There were no more bugs making noise in the trees. No bird noises, no leaves rustling in the trees. Even the footsteps of the girl walking off were gone. The boy looked to where his sister was headed towards, and she was nowhere to be found. She couldn't have walked out of sight so quickly. As the boy went after her into the woods, the noises of nature faded back in. Everything felt darker now. Like the feeling of dread I had was on every living creature in the woods. The far-off animal noises sounded angry somehow. The once gentle breeze now seemed to chill to the bone. The boy started to tremble with fear. I could feel the sensations he felt like nothing else in any dream I've had. It was unreal. Then I heard the echo of the girl calling for the boy from far off. The boy called back looking for her, but the girl didn't seem to hear him. The worry in the girl's voice quickly escalated. After about 5 or 6 calls, she sounded like she was in tears. Soon after, there was the voice of the mother calling out as well. The boy called out to them to no avail. The boy started to cry and panic. Then there was the voice of the mother again, this time at a lower volume like she was talking, but she sounded like she was within arm's reach of the boy. She said something like, "What will we do? He's been gone for days without a trace." By this time it was night and had gotten very dark. The boy saw the flicker of a campfire in the distance and began walking towards it. Around the campfire were about 4 primitive-looking men. They were dressed in animal hides and had simple bows and spears nearby. Next to them were these thin totem pole-like wooden pillars that rose up about 14 feet. The pillars were covered in small animal skeletons. Some type of meat was cooking on the fire, and it had a foul stench like something rotten. Sobbing, the boy called out to the men asking for help. They all quickly jumped up with their weapons and called out in a language that neither I nor the boy recognized, unlike anything I had ever heard. The boy cried, "I don't understand. I'm lost. I can't find my way home." The men clearly didn't understand. After more confused shouting, they glanced at each other and began to raise their weapons. The boy screamed in fear. The boy began to run off. I could feel the fear and adrenaline so clearly. The sound of arrows flying was heard behind him as the men began to howl some type of battle cry. The boy ran for about 200 feet before he fell to the ground and looked down to see an arrow in his leg. The sound of the strange men got closer and closer, muttering in that strange language. Then there was the last shot, right in the side of the boy's stomach. He looked down to see blood pouring out of his body, then looked up to see the men's hands reaching out for him. This was when I woke up crying and screaming. I had never in my life had a dream like that. For about a month after that, I slept very poorly. My wife told me I would wake up at the smallest noises, and in a half-asleep daze, I would flail my arms at her and shout, "Who? Who are you?" I wouldn't remember it, but she seemed really freaked out by it. I hadn't had issues like that since, though. Sorry, that was a lot, I know. It was a really unreal experience, and I wanted to get it out there.
I was in Cambodia filming some nature documentary, narrated live by some British guy. We wandered around some rivers surrounded on both sides by a rainforest and a small climbable cliff on one side. We scaled that cliff, and I replaced my camera, which had an empty battery, with a new one. We wandered through the rainforest for a while before coming along a road in a car. I guess it was our car because we got in and drove to some large Cambodian city. I remember some gang of young kids goofing around, and we made some remark on them. He started driving to some place in a rural area. During the drive, he told me we were going to an abandoned industrial plant, which left residual chemicals in the air-water of the surrounding area. Residual chemicals which supposedly cause madness. Somewhere along the way, we ran into a somewhat overweight Cambodian man, running away from where we were going, screaming and yelling about something in Cambodian. We exited the car when we got closer to the site. On the ground was this rectangle of cut metal, and on it were weird images. I can't remember what of, but they were very dark. There were definitely people's faces, screaming and morphing on it, in very quick succession, not really morphing. One face, another face, clipping very fast like some video. By now it was very dark out, the sun almost completely gone. The site was a bunch of cement cylinders, the kind I think they used to make quick temporary tunnels, drains of some kind, hollowed out in the center. Those cylinders, as well as a bunch of other random scrap metal and junked vehicles. Lots of rust lying down on a grass field by a dirt road. Out of the junk emerged this weird minotaur-like demon thing. It was huge, probably 10 feet tall, with a hulkish body. It was very shadowy, totally black, but it had bull-like horns and the face was very minotaur-like. It charges towards me, but it can't actually get right to me. It's blocked by some sort of force field which flows like liquid in front of him. He's emanating this horrible noise, not screaming because he has no mouth. It's like this low, guttural vibration. I don't know where the British guy is anymore. I lay my hand on the force field and my whole body is shaking and vibrating. It's like the entire world, or maybe my perspective of it, morphs and shakes. The feeling is what I imagine G-force feels like on your body or something. Then the field breaks, and the Minotaur demon sort of leaps at me and I wake up. This was months and months ago, maybe a year ago. The past week I've had 2 water dreams, or segments of dreams that I remember. First one, I was put into a big tube, pick-related, filled with water, but it went up and down for what seemed like forever. There were people on the outside of the glass looking in, like an aquarium. I was floating up slowly. Woke up when I got near the top. Another dream was a few nights ago. I was in some kind of submarine craft thing, descending into a big water tube, but way bigger than the other dreams one, miles in diameter. We descend, it gets darker, and I see a huge, insanely huge serpent. It's colorful, red and yellow and green stripes all over it, swirling around deep below. I'm uncomfortable, but someone on the radio tells me to be calm. It's probably harmless and it's much further away than it looks. But I say no, I want out. I sort of half realize I'm in a dream, and I shake around and kind of wake up, but my body is heavy in reality. And I just go back to sleep after moving around a bit, content that my next dreams will be less frightening. I don't remember the next dreams, but I woke up quite calm.
I have regular lucid dreams. There are a few stock locations, as I call them, where my lucid dreams take place. The first of these is also the oldest. I call it the Salt Box. It's an early 1900s style house, 3-story, sort of, and it's colored a very annoying shade of blue. Think robin's egg blue, but with a heavy gray tint. The house is clearly on a sound stage, even though the porch light is a glaring bright blue-white shade. If you squint, you can see the catwalks and stars hanging from the very high ceiling. The backyard is AstroTurf, but the good stuff, not shitty outdoor carpet. Let's start with the first room you'll encounter when you go into the door from the backyard, the kitchen. The kitchen is small, maybe 10 feet on a side, maybe less. It's furnished like we're in post-war Britain. Bright white tile, linoleum tile, shitty furniture. So before I go further, there is something I must explain. Doors. The back door and the kitchen door are the only doors in the Salt Box that have canonical connections. The back door always connects to the kitchen, and the kitchen door always connects to the dining room. All other doors can connect to any other door in the Salt Box, and with some effort, and a little luck, I can have almost any door in the Salt Box connect to any other door. There are a myriad of other rooms in the Salt Box that I have discovered, including the reading room, the smoking room, the bathroom, and the only space in the Salt Box that I appear to have any influence over, my room. My room is the attic, which I converted into a halfway decent bedroom. It is dark if you look too far. The stone walls chiseled out both organically by water and inorganically by artisans. The stone hue is an earthy sand or off blue-gray slate. There is quiet and the distant sound of water. Pathways lead for what feels like small eternities, wandering with limited vision. I know where the false pathways are and guide myself to the inner grottos that emit a gentle, otherworldly light. The silvery pools reflect this color, the water clear as crystal. If you go far enough, you find the ziggurat that leads to the necropolis, one of the many sanctuaries. The light of the sun has never shunned this place. The natural catacombs wind and twist, sometimes giving way to great scenes of underground landscapes. There is no real way up unless you know the way. There are no predators nor enemies unless you make them yourself. Most people make such things and wander the labyrinth screaming and wailing as a result. I cannot empathize.
Extremely detailed dream matches, real-life location I've never been to. I've never seen Langley Air Force Base before in my life. I've never traveled there nor looked at it using a GPS or maps program. I saw the Katherine Johnson building in an image today. I immediately recognized it from a very vivid, detailed dream I had. I started off in the library and walked the red path around the parking lot of the Katherine Johnson building. At each stop, I went into the buildings and spoke to someone. I was checking computer systems in those buildings. I was checking and notating the processor models and which systems had dedicated graphics cards and recording those. I was also checking the power supplies of systems to determine if they could power an upgraded graphics card or not. Then I went over to the building I have circled in blue. I was meeting some coworkers there, and they were in that building to go watch a movie. Unfortunately, whatever they were involved in, I wasn't allowed to go in and watch the same movie as them. Someone offered to let me go chill in another room during it and watch a different movie. I turned down the offer and left the building to go get something to eat. When I went outside, vehicles were pulling into the lot with emergency lights on, typical red-blue strobe. They weren't running audible sirens for some reason. A lot of these vehicles were pulling in. I left the area walking back along the red path. I didn't want anything to do with whatever was going on. Someone saw me as I was rounding the corner back towards the Katherine Johnson building. I went inside really quickly and went back and kind of pretended I was doing my previous task of checking the computer systems out when some of the people from the emergency vehicles came into the room. At gunpoint, I was told I had to come with them. Then I woke up. What the fuck?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.